All right, let's get started. All right, so I'm Courtney Osborne. I am the person hosting this event. We are here to talk about knitwear. So basically, this is a little bit like Knitwear 101, but also just general talk about knitwear with these great four experts. Once again, we've got Amanda Thomé, Cristina Hernandez, Kate Knight, and Marinés Medina. Um, we are going to do a little bit of Q&A throughout the talk, but most of the questions are going to come at the end. If you put a question in to the form when you signed up, thank you for doing that. We've incorporated those topics into the panel discussion, so hopefully we answer your questions. If we don't answer your questions and you want to ask a specific question again, you can put it in the chat or hold it to the end or raise your hand. At each interval of topic change, I will take one or two questions, but we have to keep it short so that we can keep things moving. So panelists, you lovely ladies, will you each introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about your background, one to 3 to 5 minutes, just about you and what you do. Amanda, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm Amanda. I feel like I know a lot of people here already, so hi guys. I run a knitwear design studio, so I help brands work from design to development and focusing also on technical knitwear and doing stuff like that. I was drawn to knitwear, I think probably in college at FIT when I specialized in it. I think when I got onto the knitting machine, I was like, oh, this is so cool. I can create my own textiles. Because I feel like I was always like a textile person, maybe even more than an apparel person for a bit. So that's really what attracted me to knitwear, for sure. Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
No, that's perfect. Cristina, you want to go next? I'm just going in alphabetical order, just so you guys know.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cristina Hernandez. I'm a knitwear designer and budding knitwear educator. I've been working in the industry for about 15 years, where I was the design director for small contemporary knitwear brands like 525 America. And within the past 2 years, I launched my own knitwear design consulting business where I help brands do the technical and production aspects of knitwear.
Thank you, Cristina. All right, Kate?
Yeah, like I think quite a lot of us, I actually did my degree in textile design and sort of didn't want to go into fashion for quite a long time. And I was also going to be a printer for an afternoon and then realised that I hated putting things in repeat, which is now, the joke is on me because I do quite a lot of jacquards and cables, which involve putting things in repeat. I was in New York for 4 years working for a big cashmere supplier, Barney's, Nordstrom's, Lands' End, and then moved back to London, worked for the same company but sort of the top end of the British High Street, so the white company Jaeger Jigsaw, and I've been working independently as the cashmere designer for the last 4 years, small brands and startups, like a lot of us here. And I'm happy that I finally decided to be a fashion designer after a lot of time saying I wasn't going to be a fashion designer.
We're glad you're a fashion designer too, Kate.
Not so bad.
That's really funny.
Mari.
That you didn't want to be a fashion designer. I've been wanting to be a fashion designer since I was like 8 years old. I have been in the knitwear industry now for like 12 years. It feels like half of that time I've been doing it in my own business, which has been like a very different thing. And then half of the time working in a corporate setting for big scale brands, a little bit more fast fashion. I think what drew me to, I wanted to be a fashion designer. So I went to FIT in fashion school, and then I had never worn a sweater in my life. I feel like everyone has heard this joke already just because I grew up in Puerto Rico and I had never really been exposed to any kind of knitting, crochet, or any part of things like that. So I just fell in love with it in school, just kind of the technicality of it, the creativity of it. It also felt a lot more organic, and organic in the sense of like forgiving. Just, I am not a perfectionist. I'm very much an in the flow kind of person. So I feel like knitwear, even though very technical, leads to that. Like, you can wear a size extra small, you can also wear a size extra large, or and it just kind of goes with the flow a little bit more, like my personality. So that's kind of what drew me to it. It felt very just natural for me to go in that way and be very, very creative. For when I started April Knit Studio in 2020, I started working with very completely different brands that I was used to in the past. So I had to kind of rebuild my network and started sourcing in different parts of the world. I only worked with China in my experience, and I started meeting people in Italy, meeting people in Peru, sourcing different kinds of fibers, relearning really my industry in a more sustainable way with natural fibers, organic fibers, and learning about wool, which sounds silly because I just worked with polyester and acrylic, and I was very used to those types of fibers. And then just really learning and falling in love with natural fibers and learning what are my favorite like yarns in that industry. And now I work a lot more with South America, and that's actually where I'm moving my business towards, is doing hand crochet, hand knitting, machine knitting, industrial knitting, and hand knitting machines. And working, connecting brands with artisans, manufacturers, and really like not just like translating knitwear as a language, as a technical language for brands, but also providing my own mother language, and communicating and collaborating and really connecting people. I love being a connector from brands, knitwear, and manufacturing.
That was beautiful, Mari. I also love connecting people, hence the name of my business.
Yes.
All right, a little rapid fire question situation right now. I didn't warn you guys of this, so if you can't answer, you gotta say pass. All right. Amanda, what is a good resource for people who want to start expanding their knit knowledge?
This book is really good.
Love it, love it, love it.
Yeah, the Knitwear manual. It's it's good resource even for knitwear designers, like people who do know things. So I'm sure that it's really really helpful.
Really
Kate has it too.
Yeah, great.
Mari, what's a resource you use every day? It doesn't have to be specific to knitwear. It could be anything.
ChatGPT. Okay, that's like terrible answer. I don't know. Like, actually, like every day, I do use my my knitting books a lot, like my stitch books, and I have tried combing the internet with vintage knitting books, but just like not the ones that are like knitting patterns, but knit swatches. I love those. I use them a lot. I love designing stitches, and I just kind of combine those like books together and like arrows here and there when I design.
Love it. All right, Kate, what's a good resource for people who want to expand their knit knowledge?
Yarn Bank is a good one if you're looking for yarns and it's not perfect, but it's a good starting point.
Yeah.
So that's Shima Siki's own database of yarns.
All right, Cristina, what's a resource you use every day?
I mean, spreadsheets, right? That is like, I use spreadsheets of all kinds, and someone was recently telling me about Airtable. So,
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I haven't explored it too much either, but apparently it's like the new way to organize data. And I like spreadsheets, and they function to me a lot like knitting does, where it's like you have to like cleanly organize your information in a structural way, and I appreciate that, so I use it all the time.
That's so funny. As soon as you said spreadsheets, that was my first thought. I was like, it's a grid.
Yeah, exactly.
Airtable is awesome. I used it for about 15 months at Fanatics. Airtable's great.
I was just gonna ask anyone else who's used Airtable, can you like throw an emoji in the chat or like whatever?
I've never even heard from this.
I
need
haven't
to look it
either.
up.
Let's see. Kate, thank you for the Yarn Bank link. Alrighty, moving on. We are going to talk about the basics of knit. So I'm actually going to share my screen for this beautiful knitwear presentation that Cristina and Amanda put together.
Do you have your notes ready?
I honestly didn't know that was going to be live, but yeah. We just presented this yesterday, so everything's fresh in my mind. But yeah. Should we just...
Yeah,
I'm excited to see
can
it.
Everyone see?
Please, I want to learn.
Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, let's roll.
So this is a really good display of just like a visual of the difference between a weave and a knit. So a weave is done by going up and under, crisscrossing threads within each other, right? And that creates something that's like not very stretchy, but usually very durable. And a knit is done by looping threads through each other. And that creates a bit more stretch generally, depending on tension and all that. And they're both great. They're both used for different things. Yeah. Cut and sew. So if you go into, I saw some questions about this, I think, about like what is cut and sew. So when you go into a fabric store and you ask for a knit, this is what you're gonna get. It's gonna be a large roll of like a cut and sew fabric. And that's done on this machine that is a circular machine, and it's basically knitting in a spiral over and over again to create this huge roll of fabric. Go ahead, Kate.
Yes, to say there is a massive bit, a lot of confusion between knitwear and knitted fabrics, and
yes,
I wish we had a better way to define that.
Yeah,
as an industry.
I totally agree. Yeah, so after like you have the fabric, it follows something pretty similar to woven construction. So it would be like the patterns would be placed on the fabric, cut out and sewn. In knitwear, we use a different machine called a linker, which is a circular machine to put the panels together. But in cut and sew, we use just a regular kind of overlock machine.
Yeah, we'll go to the next one. So this is a computerized double bed V-bed knitting machine. And the primary difference between something like cut and sew and full fashion knitwear is that you're designing both the textile and the pattern piece, the garment, simultaneously. So those two pieces can't be pulled apart. So on full fashion knitting machines, you will like spit out your completed pattern piece, right? Versus cut and sew where you're unrolling fabric, right? And you're laying your flat pattern pieces out and you're cutting it out of a predetermined fabric design, right? So it allows a full fashion, a knitwear designer, you can engineer your pattern placement on every single item in an economic way. And that's sort of what we would consider the primary difference. And some of the most common knitting machine companies worldwide are Shimaseki, which is a Japanese company, and Str8tlines, which is a German company.
And Str8tlines, which is maybe going to be sold or go out of business.
Is
really
it?
soon.
Oh,
really?
Yeah, like as of today. Anyway.
Wow.
Yeah. So
this one, again, this just shows that quick comparison, right? So for that cut and sew knitwear, you've got that flat fabric, that roll of fabric, versus full fashion knitwear, right? Your pattern pieces are fully contained within that textile.
I love this chart. Like, this is a really clear way to show it.
It's a good visual, right?
Yeah, it's really good visual.
Before we continue, I will take one question if somebody wants to unmute and ask real quick. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay.
I don't remember whose this is. Do you?
Oh, I think this is yours, but I mean, we could both talk on it. We can all talk on it.
So, like, and then another big distinguishing factor about knitwear, right, is we start typically in industrial knitwear, you design from the bottom up. So, unlike in cut and sew and wovens, where hems are almost the last thing you do, right, when you're constructing a garment, it's really the first thing you think about when designing knitwear. And that's why sweaters and other knitwear pieces are, you can typically identify them by that band that exists around the bottom, right? The other thing we talked about is how you're not cutting your pieces out, you're shaping them on that knitting machine panel. So you come up, what did I do with that swatch? Bear with me. Right, so instead
Hold
of
on, I'm
cutting,
gonna stop sharing,
right?
so you can share or you can hold that up.
Yeah. So like instead of cutting to create your shape, you're moving stitches on the machine, and you can see it nice clearly here to help create that armhole curve. And that's how we do shaping for necklines and armholes, in all sorts of different ways. And you can see that it creates this nice, clean, finished edge that's not going to unravel.
And that's when you see those little knobbles. That's called fully fashioned, but yeah, they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
So trims is something that's really important too, especially if you like a lot of details, and you can do some really cool luxury things with trims. So it's kind of a balance between function and design. So obviously trims are used for function, for example, a placket on a cardigan, or it could be used more for design, like a rolled edge on a neckline, for example. There's a lot that you can do. It's a fun kind of finishing part that adds, if you want to do something more luxurious, it kind of gives that little edge, at least I think so. For linking, so linking is what I talked about earlier. It's this circular machine that creates a chain to link the pattern, the panels together. Yeah, it's a cool thing. I don't know.
I was thinking about this last night because someone was asking me what the difference is between this and sewing. So when you're sewing something, your needle is piercing the fabric and breaking up the fibers, right, to penetrate and to hold them together. Versus linking, it's all blunt. So it's really moving in between the stitches and then helps join them together, right?
Yeah, because if it were to pierce the fabric, it would unravel, and that just wouldn't work. Sorry.
I was going to say, it's a really skilled job in a factory to be a linker, and often factories have problems recruiting and keeping linkers. It's sort of an ongoing issue with lots of factories I've worked with, that linkers, I think also because you have to match up the holes of each stitch. So like imagine doing that for 9 or 10 hours a day.
Something I wanted to add on trims and finishing details is that that is a way a garment goes from being just like cheap to luxurious, just because you can design a very minimalistic sweater, but then if the finishings are very like high end and specific, it just raises the price point of the sweater automatically. Finishing, like there are sweaters out there that are fully finished sweaters but have no shaping whatsoever, and it just doesn't fall the same on the body. And even the shaping itself can be, there's a million different ways to show the shaping of a sweater and show the needles and the way that you design into those finishings that are not only functional but luxurious.
So gauge is a term that you'll hear a lot in knitwear and can have multiple meanings. It can refer to fabric gauge. It can also refer to machine gauge. So in machine and industrial knitting, it has a very specific definition, and it refers to the number of slots available for needles per inch on the machine. And it's very fixed. So the amount of needles you can fit determines the maximum or typically minimum sort of stitch size, and it's inversely proportionate. So if you see 3 gauge, it means it can hold up to 3 needles per inch, and those needles are pretty big. Then as you get higher in number, you're cramming more needles in. So the needles have to be finer, and so does the yarn. If we go to the next slide, it will show some from the side. Okay, great. So like starting at the top, you can see a 3.5 gauge needle. All the way at the bottom, you can see that 18 gauge needle, right? And the different hook size. So as you can imagine, the yarn size, the maximum yarn size that would fit comfortably within that hook can vary. And then this other on the right here, we can see this image, and this is like a bird's eye view of that V-bed. And you can see the needles laying in those slots, and that's what determines the gauge. And that yellow is the yarn transversing the needles in the carriage. And that was that mechanism that was moving horizontally across the needle bed in the full fashion knitting video. And these are just some, I think I put yours and mine here at the end. I think we're coming to the end of these.
Oh, okay.
So these are just some examples of my CADs and sketches, and like the different variety that exists, and mostly that to show that like a fancy 3D render can be just as valid or like as a sketch on a Post-it. And that professionally I have utilized all of these, and honestly more so probably the Post-it. Like you can see like tons of beautiful illustrations, but frequently you're really just trying to communicate your idea clearly, so whatever format that takes is totally valid. Yeah, these are Amanda's.
Yeah, these are some flats and drawings that I did. You can see that in knitwear, you kind of have to detail the stitches in the flats sometimes. You don't always have to be so detailed, but it's helpful, especially if you're doing some like rib shaping, like on the skirt, if you're adding cables and all of that.
These are so cute, Amanda.
Oh, thank you. They're old. Thanks.
All right. Okay, so while we're still in the beginning conversation here, there was a question about what is the top know-hows that would help someone who wants to manage knitwear as a multi-product designer? So somebody who wants to manage like cut and sew and knitwear. Is there anything specific that you would give as advice for them?
Collaboration. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to learn it all. Just collaborate with someone. Okay, like that, maybe that's not super helpful, but that's what I would do. And that's what sometimes I do to help some of my friends that do cut and sew and wovens. Just have a buddy, and that person can help you manage the multi-product designs. You don't have to, as a knitwear designer, I do not want to know it all about cut and sew. You know, like I had one cut and sew thing that I've done actually the first time in my whole like 5 years that I've done business, and I did it as a favor because the other stuff were sweaters and it was so simple. I was like, I don't really want to do this. Like, I don't even know what the single needle like top stitch. I forgot about that. I haven't put that word in a tech pack in like 20 years, feels like. So but if you do feel like a genuine interest in knitwear, I think getting people's time, I think it's really hard to learn knitwear outside of school just by books. I think that the book that just came out like a few months ago, what is it called, the Knitwear Manual, like that's an amazing resource that did not exist. Like I just remember having friends in the industry message me like 10 years ago, like someone that was a printmaker, a pattern maker, not a pattern maker, like just, yeah, print designer. How do I learn more about knitwear? I work in a knitwear company and I just cannot understand the knitwear, and I am a like, you know, print designer here, and I just couldn't come up with anything, honestly. Most of the things they're going to find online are going to be on the craft side of things. things, which is helpful sometimes, but it's not in like when you're working in a big company, that's not what's going to fully help you to understand the knitwear that you're going to be building. So I just say I'm always in the side of collaboration, and like as a business owner, as a freelance designer, if you're a freelance designer, like you don't have to know it all. Like don't feel like you have to know it all.
One thing that can be helpful is to buy thrift store sweaters and pull them apart, and sort of then you understand like how the yarn went in if you undo it. So I have done that, but yeah, it's really hard. I've thought about this too, like when it all kind of clicked for me, and it is being on the machine, and that's hard to do when you're not in college.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that for sure. I mean, I guess you could start learning more about like tension and gauge and kind of understand machine limitations, you know, pick up some needles and start doing some hand knitting just to like understand the actual structure of what is being done. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
All right, next question is going to be kind of a twofer, but at what point do you determine what yarn type or stitch type you're going to use? Is it normally considered during the initial design phase? And then how do you determine the proper yarn for a specific design or customer segment?
You want to go ahead?
Are those two different questions? Because I totally put them together because I thought they were relatable. But if they're two different, we can split them up.
No, they're definitely related. It's just you can't use it if you want it to go
broad.
first.
It's a broad question.
It's a bit, yeah, and I think I would probably say it's kind of chicken and egg. Like, what comes first, the yarn or the sweater? You know, it's all kind of.
Yes.
And that's what I often say to my clients, because what often will happen is they say, I want 100% merino, and then that price comes back, and that's too expensive, so then you have to go back, and then, so it is this sort of process. It's not, you don't sort of go this and this and put it together. It's kind of a mishmash. But what other people do?
I usually ask people like, what do you want to make? How many do you want to make approximately? And how much do you want to pay? And that will help drive those questions, right? So like merino is like an excellent example where they're saying, I want merino, but I want to make 10,000 and I want to buy, and I want them to be under $3 US a piece. Those goals may be incompatible. So it's just another way of like figuring out. So like, no matter what, you want to start with like what your goal is and all of that pre-planning. And that's where like people like us can help you. So if you have like a goal and an idea, we can map out how to get you there.
That's exactly it. I was thinking about like, you need to have some boundaries, and when you have those boundaries set with the brand, then you can start thinking about the yarn and the design. Budget is one of the first things like that I talk about these days. I don't want to talk about budget. I want to be creative. But I mean, it helps creativity because you need to have restrictions to be able to be creative. And starting with the type of yarn, yes, is really helpful, but it's more like, what do you want? What do you want? What does your brand need? Who is your customer? What is the budget of your customer? What is your budget? How many units are you going to do this? And there's like a whole conversation that happens before I even get to like think about the yarn versus the design. It's like I talk about which country do you want to manufacture? What is some people have just like a vision, and that vision doesn't really match up with reality in terms of like, I want to manufacture in the US. And what does that mean to you? Or what do you imagine that being, right? Or let me enlighten you. And like, it's not a bad thing. It's just like, they're, in the US, for example, like you have to kind of piecemeal some things. You have to ship the yarn from somewhere. There is some yarn manufacturing happening here, but it's very limited. If you are working with Peru, for example, you are you're using their 3 mills that they have in the whole country, and you're very limited on yarn, but you have very different options for construction, like hand knitting, mixing hand with machine, industrial. You're moving within the ecosystem of a whole country. If you want to manufacture in China, you want something more technical, you also have their yarns. It's just such a big conversation. That's why we both had to, we all had to like breathe deep before we even thought, what is the strategy here, and which lane do you want to take the conversation when you want to start thinking about design and yarn, and choosing the yarn versus the design. And I think each of us like probably has different strategies around this, and that's like the beauty of it too. Like, you know, like Kate may have a certain perspective on which way to go if a client comes and starts talking about that versus Cristina or Amanda. And I love having these conversations with them too, because it helps me think outside the box. But yeah, it's really, really hard to see it, and I could keep talking about this for 3 hours, but that's like the short version of it.
Yeah, I think also different countries have a slightly different aesthetic. You know, like you say, like kind of tends to be cleaner and more technical, and then Peru more sort of, you know. So even within that, you get the different sort of feelings.
Yep.
I would say that's something I've really come to acknowledge over the past few years, and that is, in general, different countries have different specialities, and that and that you can look at a specific country and be like, they make footwear, or they produce leather, and so like that kind of knowledge will come in time, unless you specifically go out and, you know, research it to learn it. I'm going to move on to the next section, which is real talk, and we're going to get behind the scenes a little bit. So I'm going to go a little bit rapid fire and just kind of throw some questions out there. Again, if you don't want to answer, just say pass. So what's something that people often misunderstand about working with knitwear? Kate.
The minimums tend to be higher, and the cost tends to be higher. So that can be a roadblock from the get-go. And I guess the other one is when people say, well, what fabric should I use? And then I'm like, let's talk about it's not fabric. And then, yeah, the people mixing up. I've literally been on calls with knitwear factories that make like cut and sew hoodies, and been trying to explain, like, I'm not your right person. You shouldn't, you know, I'm not your person. And I wish somehow we could differentiate that better.
Yeah, I think that's a really common misconception, or just misunderstanding in general, is that knitwear, actual knit, fully fashioned knits versus cut and sew. And I think that a lot of people on this call were trying to understand that as well. So I think you guys have already done a really wonderful job of explaining that, and I appreciate that we really started there. All right. Any early lessons that you learned when you first started designing or developing a knit? Cristina.
I got my start in a very small hand knitting and hand crochet factory. And I had a manager once tell me that she never orders extra smalls. They just come. And that like stuck with me forever.
That's great. I'm borrowing that.
I don't understand. Explain.
So and this is like, that's like a really esoteric joke. Like with gauge, which in hand knitting and hand crochet we talked about. So like with hand knitting and hand crochet, you're working much more in a workshop formula, not so much on those computerized machines. So your production is a little bit more difficult to manage. And so you have, and we would always say one knitter, one garment. That was another one too. Don't mix knitters on different garments, because everybody's got slightly different techniques and tensions that can make your garment very, very wonky and not sellable. So as part of her control methods, and to keep her production knitters happy, she would be like, if your garment comes in a little bit too small, you know what, let me take a look at that. We might be able to accept it, right? Because those variations happen when you're making things by hand. And we would be able to cull essentially our extra smalls out of like smalls that were made too tiny or too tight, right? Like all of these things affect how your finished garment comes out.
Everything you just said was super enlightening to me. I don't know about anybody else, but that. All right. What's different about timelines, sampling, or communication with a knitwear production partner versus like a cut and sew, Amanda?
Oh, I actually haven't worked much in cut and sew at all, so I wouldn't
Can
know
I
the
answer
difference.
this one?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Marie, go.
I don't know.
Sorry, Amanda.
You probably know more than me with that.
I just had a situation just I think 2 days ago. Yesterday, I'm dealing with a situation that is really relevant to this. I'm collaborating with a design studio that they work in all categories and have like collections that need like 5 to 3 knitwear pieces. And basically, like even in the because these are like gonna be it's runway, but not fully runway, but just more like they do show on Fashion Week. They're working on a much tighter timeline. The pieces are much more expensive, so they are working with different manufacturers that are working probably closer to them in New York and things like that. And even like in their timeline when they started like this month, and they're expecting things to be fully finished for SMS like in July. And because these are very like they involve a lot of linking and a lot of like doing a lot more handwork, they're going to be very intricate. So we're trying to choose a factory, and like my friend who manages like full-on collections, she's getting so impatient. She's like, wovens is so easy. Like wovens and cut and sew is so easy. Like, why are we having so many issues? And I'm like, yeah, to make these pieces, we needed to start 6 months ago. Unfortunately, it's like, yes, dealing with minimums, which is fine. That's not even the biggest issue right now, but it's more like trying to find a partner that can work on like these very special pieces, and the yarn, and involving the yarn conversation into it, like the type of yarn that you would need. You can't just source yarn online if we don't already have the library of yarn that specifically needs. We need to feel and see the yarn to see if it really needs, like if we can use it for this type of design. Ordering the yarn to the factory in New York, it's like a whole thing that it's very different than just working even with a factory in New York, where you can just like go to Mood, get the fabric or an equivalent of the fabric that you need, get the factory, like turnover. Like it's just so different. Like you need engineers to run these machines. The engineer needs to have their opinion on the design, plus the designer, plus the manager of the engineer. It's just really, it can be really complicated and expensive, much more expensive.
I'm trying to think of like what a good comparison to knitwear would be, like in any other realm of being, and I can't think of one. Can any of you? Like we talk about like tech designs as like engineers, so like what is an comparison to like building knitwear? Is there anything?
Knitwear designers.
You're really good at this, Kate. You need to come up with something. I feel like you're really good at this. Like.
Like past, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like what I always like to work in partnership with the factory, and so that conversation, so it's not and I've had projects that have been really frustrating when I haven't been able to talk directly to the factory, because it's not a kind of reduce this by 1 centimeter and then you'll have the right pattern kind of answer. It is somewhere between an art and a science, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh yeah, I have my factories on WhatsApp, like
yeah.
I'm hoping nothing happens, but I'm just gonna say this out loud in case anything crazy, like a huge storm just blew in. So if I happen to get disconnected, I'm really sorry, and we might have to like round back on this.
Oh my god, it's gonna be here soon too.
Okay, so in regards to this conversation, I feel like this is a great like transition. So like when you're fitting knitwear, how do you solve issues about like adding or removing stitches or adjusting the fit?
Oh yeah, I did see this question and I was like, have I removed stitches before? And I have, like, when I thought about it, I'm like, I have asked to remove, like, okay, very specific amount, but generally I would ask to remove, like, an actual measurement, so like a half an inch, quarter inch, whatever. Yeah.
Or even just like even less technical than that and more like vibes.
I
I know that doesn't sound like the answer you want, but more like armhole sits funny because
Yeah, sometimes you do have to just say that. Yeah.
Okay, talk more about
like,
that. That feels really interesting to me as someone who's like very like measurement focused.
Well, I think it's like that's what Kate was saying, the collaboration aspect of it, and that's why I talk so much about collaboration, because it's really it. That's really it. And there's like I've done the 3 ways: the vibes, the measurements, and the stitches. I think knitwear is very much. I mean, again, it's personality. Just like hand knitting, like is like your own handwriting. Each like sometimes knitwear feels that way. I mean, I'm sure fashion it still feels that way and whatever. It can kind of you can go off the vibes with knitwear. And I think it's really funny because I was in a conversation earlier this week. Some of you guys were there, where like someone had a very specific points on how to really like make source a factory and make a collaboration with a factory. And Kate and I like had some similar answers of like, you go off the vibes a little bit, you kind of have to trust, you have to talk to the person, and you can do both ways, obviously, with factory certifications and all of that. But there's sometimes with that same collaboration, sometimes me as a designer, I am not really versed in machine, like in the machine. I'm not there with the machine. I'm not like as an engineer is. So they may know more as to what the problem is that's happening there than I do, just looking at the garment. Like, as an example that you guys have, it's like very weird and technical, but like when you have a cardigan that is like hiking in the front, sometimes that means that like the placket is not long enough. So if you cut that, you see that the placket goes up and the body goes down, right? And I know that just from experience. I wouldn't have known that like, at the very beginning, but that is something that the people that are making these garments know exactly what happened there, because they're out there like stretching the placket. They know that the engineer knows what's happening. Yeah. So if I just put some arrows, I'm like, it's hiking, they know what I'm talking about, and they know how to solve that.
Yeah, Caroline Chandler wrote a really good LinkedIn post about it recently, just sort of being like, actually, you don't want to always be so specific. Like you don't say, I don't know, you can say take out stitches, and you can say take out half an inch or whatever, but also you can just be like, something in the armhole shaping is not right.
Yeah.
Make it right.
Yeah.
Do it better.
If taking out stitches, that needs to be the solution to the problem, right? So you have to, like, if you don't know what the source of your problem is, then that's your first real issue. And sometimes we don't. And that's when we start having conversations with the factory. So if your issue is that like the tension is too loose, taking out stitches and taking out inches is not going to solve that problem. You can do it over and over and over again, right? So like it's really targeting what the source of the problem is. And it's okay not to have the answer every time, and to ask people that know more. Collaborate with partners in problem solving, right? Because they may be like, oh, we saw that too. What do you think? But
please, I write a lot of like, please review with the technician, something like that, rather than being like, I am the oracle and tell you exactly what is wrong.
I also love when factories are like, here, like option 1, we did it this way, and they'll show me the picture of the stitch. And it's like the same technique that I asked for in the tech pack, but done 2 very different ways. And maybe I asked for it wrong in the tech pack, but they came up with a better solution that I wouldn't have been able to come up with like just on a screen, and that's like the best.
That's the beauty of working with an experienced manufacturer.
Yeah, when you're working with someone you trust too, and you have like, they sometimes have better ideas than you do. Like, and it like Mari, I work a lot with Peru too, and like they do have an artisan touch, and sometimes they will know how to do something in a better way than I would. So you trust them.
But I've also been in situations where I'm working with a hand knitter and they may not know the most luxurious way to finish this. And I've like gone on like YouTube and like searched finishing for like I said, I know that in the way it needs to be like done, and I like literally send them the YouTube videos like finish it this way. There's just like such a collaboration around it. Yeah.
All right. There was a question in the chat. Do you normally work with a tech designer?
No, we're the tech designers.
No,
Exactly,
we are.
yeah.
We're the tech designers.
Going back to like what you were saying, like what the comparison. So I would say knitwear designers are like the fashion equivalent of full stack, right? We do it all, front end, back end, because you're designing the textile and the silhouette, the garment all together, right? And that's why we end up partnering with our factories so much, because you just can't pull those things apart like you can in other specialties.
One thing that I did do is that I had one of my friends that is a technical designer do my grading templates. Like, she doesn't even do my gradings for all the things. She made a template for me. I was doing it myself for many years, and then I was like, to the point I was like, I want someone else to look at this. I've never had issues, but I'm ready for this to be a little bit more automized. So she created those for me, and so I paid her for it, and now I use those. But for many years I was doing them myself, grading. It didn't feel like it was this really big deal where I needed to work with someone. I think if there comes a point where I have a garment that's really just different and complicated, I would definitely work in collaboration with someone. And I saw someone that said production. I also don't work with, some of my brands kind of handle production on their own, and sometimes I do production management, kind of depends on the client. But yeah, most of the time we're not really working in collaboration with a technical or designer to manage those aspects.
All right. We're going to move to the next section. So, advice for beginners. What's a good first knit product for someone who is just starting out? Kate.
A crew neck, a V-neck.
That's fair. If you think about it, when you're a cut and sew designer, the first thing that you ever do is always going to be a t-shirt. So, that's...
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah. Something simple, I guess. But most of us, in terms of starting out, I just sort of jumped in at the deep end.
Also, is this starting out as a freelancer or as a brand?
So yeah.
It depends.
I was categorizing this as new designers or freelancers. So like as a new designer, you're learning knitwear for the first time. What advice would you give yourself? How would you get started?
My first job, I had to measure a lot of samples, and I was doing the tech packs. I didn't have a technical designer how I had it at my second job. So I was measuring a lot of samples, and I started learning the measurements by heart.
Exactly.
I did grading. Yeah, I did grading from like Missy size to plus size, and I still sometimes know these measurements by heart. And that's what I would say. Like, you need to go into the stores, touch the things, measure. I would like buy things and measure. I measure my own things, buy all the different sizes of one product, measure them, understand how things grade up. And I started making a log of my sweaters when I started when I knew I wanted to go into freelancing. I started saving all my tech packs, but I also just started, like, I was doing Rent the Runway at that point, and I started measuring just like everything that I was renting, and just keeping a log of all those things and seeing patterns and seeing kind of like how there's no standard on sizing, and measuring. You learn a lot by measuring.
Yeah, I had a job in New York where I think it was literally 6 weeks of measuring garments, 8 hours a day, but I learned a lot.
Yeah, I was like sitting there copying garments basically. Yeah. So yeah.
All right, there was a question in the chat. What softwares do you guys use to design and knit fabrics? I'm guessing like Shima is like one of the main ones, but like
but who can afford
but we
that?
don't.
We don't. Yeah. So Christina's probably the best person to take this one.
Yes.
Okay, so like you don't design the fabric again, right? You don't design the fabric independently. They don't, right? They don't exist. And then like the programmers tend to use whatever proprietary software goes with their particular machines, right? So Stoll has, I think it was M1 or M3 is their program, and that's literally the language where you're using to tell the machine what to do. We don't design fabric and then design a garment, right? They're all together. And so you can use whatever method works, right? Just like those sketches, it doesn't really matter because it all, like if you're getting the outcome that your client and you are happy with and your company is happy with, then your method works. Whether it's taking pictures from stitch books and scrapbooking them together, that's perfectly valid. You could be doing your programming on Apex Fizz and emailing it to a factory that uses whole garment machines. Like those are all totally valid and all workable. So there's not like one universal program that I would suggest, right? I use like a mishmash of all sorts of different things.
Well, you're like designing, I don't know if you already mentioned this, but you're like designing stitches in Excel where you're like putting the grid into boxes and doing the paint bucket and designing it that way.
Yep.
Yeah. The jacquards literally, be like this square is red and this square is green. And
Or sometimes you could just send the image to the factory if like that's what you want. You know, you don't always have to be so precise about it either, depending on the factory you're working with.
How would you recommend about going to, like, developing a relationship or finding a factory that you feel like you could trust? Like, what are red flags to avoid? What are things to, like, good things to look for?
I think the same with any factory. Yeah, communication. How they email.
Trade shows are a great starting point. Your yarn mills are a great starting point too. Like they are always working with factories and they have their factories that they recommend. I have found a great factory in China through one of the mills that I work with. Just ask them straight up for the recommendation. And now we kind of know a little bit all over the world where you have like your yarn agents from, like I have yarn agents in the UK. So I've emailed the yarn agent in the UK to refer me some factories that they work with in the UK, or the yarn agent in China. That's kind of how you do it. Starting point, like, the network. I think it's really hard because it's not like this very like straight up answer about it. Just the deeper you are in your world in the knitwear, the deeper you'll find connections. Like recently, like I went to the trade show in Peru where I saw you guys, Amanda and Cristina, and one person there doesn't have they have a workshop in Cusco, which is like outside more in the mountains, not in Lima. So there's a lot of people that have their factories in the main city. So this is like more in the countryside. And she has, this is such a story. She like, her boyfriend lives in Nashville. I live in Nashville. And now we are hanging out. And she has like a hand knitting and hand machine like factory in Cusco. And then she's like, my minimums are like 10 pieces. But I think it's more like I had coffee with her. Like this is rare. This is like friendship, collaboration, and like the deeper, like that's like the more experience you have, the deeper you go into these connections and the better you can work with people. Like I had an issue where like I have this mill that never answers my emails, and Peru has 3 mills that everyone uses all the time. It's a monopoly. So I was like, these people never answer. I use their yarn when I'm working directly with the factory and they're like shipping the yarn to them. I have no problem. I can still use their yarn. But if I want my US client that does US manufacturing to use this yarn in Peru, they won't even answer my email. So she literally gave me like the phone number of the person she uses, like on WhatsApp. I'm like, what? This is crazy. But I've been doing this for like more than 5 years now, and you get deeper into these relationships and collaborations. And sometimes you do go off the vibes, of the factory. Are they answering this email? You start seeing your red flags, your beige flags, and all of that. And the other piece of this is communicating this to your client. That's a hard one, because sometimes the client is really set on doing manufacturing in this one place, and I'm like, I'm seeing all these red flags. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And they still want to do it. So there's so many parts of it. And then there's also a more official way that you can vet process and certifications. I just said so much.
No, that's really helpful. There's been a couple questions about MOQs. Do you guys have any recommendations about finding factories that will do low MOQs? Like Mari, you said 10, which I know is like highly probably unusual, but like, is there anyone that will do very small units?
Yeah, there are some places. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember who suggested, but going to trade shows. I've been to a few here in New York, and there's been some that were like, oh, we have no MOQ. And I haven't worked with them, so I don't know what they're like, but I have seen it for sure.
Yeah, it's a bit of a red flag for me when they say no.
I had that feeling too, but it exists. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
Something to look into.
There is also Knit Up in Hong Kong, where their whole business model is they'll do.
Yes.
Again, it does. Yeah. It could be
But at the same time, it's their template. Yeah. It's templates. So that's why they do that. You can't do your own custom design with zero MOQ. You have to use a template. And
you can't break all of those pieces apart. How much do you want to pay? How many do you want to make? Right. And what do you want to make? You know what I mean? So like, are you willing to pay $1,000 per item? Then maybe, we can definitely, no problem. You can manufacture whatever you want. You just can't answer those types of questions without that holistic view and approach.
And it's the good fast cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any advice you would give to a manufacturer, like on how they could be a better partner or improve, like communication, or let's make this a little more specific. Any advice you would give to a manufacturer that was trying to work with someone in the U.S. or the EU?
Improved communication for sure, or if they have a doubt about something, to reach out instead of just doing it incorrectly.
Yeah.
So reaching out to your clients and asking oh, is this what you're looking for? Hey, option A, option B, kind of like Mari said, things like that really help.
And also having a presentation. I've met manufacturers that really the product is not appealing to the US market at all. Like the product that they're showing as examples of their work. And I know that you can get there. I know you have the technicality in place, but it's really not appealing and it's not helping you get new customers. So I think it's presentation matters. These days, you don't need to have a website as a manufacturer, and sometimes people really don't want to, but have a deck to show some of the product that you are able to do. So I that's what I've seen that has changed. Even the effort in doing a deck shows that you are willing to get new business and are serious about that.
Two notes for
theme the garments. I've been sent decks where the garments are creased, and I'm like, bye-bye.
Yeah.
I want to share two notes really quick. And one is that I recently saw someone give the advice that if you do have a deck, make sure that your name and your contact information is on somewhere in the file or on every page, because they can get lost, pages can get ripped out. Somebody's like, I really want this factory, but I have no idea who this belongs to.
And put MOQs in that deck as well. That annoys me when they don't send.
And my second piece of advice here, shameless plug for these ladies here. If you are a factory watching this, and you want help getting into a U.S. market or in France or London or something, I'm talking about Kate here, talk to these ladies, ask their advice, hire them as a consultant, help them improve your business, or let them help you improve your business. That is a thing that we can do as consultants and freelancers. So we are coming to the end here. I'm going to let you guys keep answering questions for another 5-10 minutes if you're open to it. Thumbs up, thumbs down? Yeah? Okay. What's a reasonable MOQ that's not a red flag? So if you're going to a trade show and you're like, okay, no MOQ, red flag. What's not a red flag?
I would say 100.
100. Yeah.
Okay.
It depends. It depends. Like, it's not that no MLQ is a red flag. It's more like, I need more information. Because
Yeah.
you are acting in a way that is not typical, that I can't file you into a category that I understand. So, like, 100 or 300 is quite standard when you're working overseas. Generally, yeah, like if you're, but again, it's all about price point and it's all about units. And you can, to me, finding the right manufacturer, it's match. So, like, let's get you where you want to go. Don't give me one puzzle piece. That's not going to get what you need, right? And like, even with matchmaking, works with referrals, right? Word of mouth is always the best way, right? Like, the best way to find factories. Being set up by your friends, you will find someone that's probably way better for you than you will on Tinder.
And I wanted to add to that too, like Cristina. I mean, you have a great point, and it's just like it really, really, really depends. Like in the example of Knit Up that you brought up, Kate, that is someone that, like, they have a very different business, like very different business setup, in the sense that they sell templates, and that's how they can do that. So within their rules, within their boundaries, then they can accomplish this for you. And that's why, like, everyone has such a different need. If you have a small, like, hand machine workshop in the rural parts of, like, Peru or Lithuania, then you might be dealing with, like, less MOQs, because they don't actually have the capacity to handle more. They don't have maybe 6 knitters in there. And so that's why it's depending on each case, and that's why you have to do the matchmaking for your client, because you have these different needs.
Yeah.
There's been quite a few questions about Mongolia. Do you guys have any point of reference about Mongolia, using their yarns or manufacturers? Any experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the basket of the world's cashmere supply, right?
Yeah,
like,
I'm from Kashmir, so.
Yeah.
Kate?
Yeah. I haven't done a lot of production in Mongolia, I have to be honest. I know I've had people come to me after production in Mongolia and wanting to do Chinese production. So that's my honest, that's been I've talked to people who haven't always had great experience of Mongolian production. So I haven't actually done much of it.
What about the production in Mongolia has not been good? Like, can you give any specific, like, is it communication? Is it the product?
This has been what I've heard, is that it's not consistent. So a small will be larger than a large. And that's just been what I've heard from people, and then I've just found it. Yeah, I haven't had someone come to me specifically saying I have to have Mongolian production. So, and then there's a lot of confusion around Inner Mongolia and Mongolia.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that Inner Mongolia is Mongolia.
It seems like I think like there's so much talk about Mongolian cashmere, and I actually haven't had the opportunity to work with Mongolia. It seems like they need their people that can serve as a connector. Sometimes factories, like that person that is, like, I think in different factories called maybe like the merchandiser, where they like serve as a translator almost of, like, between the client and the factory, to in the same way that I was saying, like, factories should show the kind of product that they want to, the kind of product that they want to get, so if you're not showing your capabilities, or you're not, like, you need someone to serve as a connector for you. That can be a designer, that can be a merchandiser, someone that can translate those ideas to get you those clients. And I haven't actually worked with anyone in Mongolia, but I'm sure that happens not just with Mongolia, but with a lot of different countries that want to get into want to get business in different places.
All right, I'm going to invite anyone to unmute and ask a question if you'd like. If someone's speaking and you want to go next, use the raise hand function. and then we'll probably end in the next 5 or 7 minutes. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Will you tell me?
It's you can just call me Mona.
Call you what?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Mona.
Yeah. Mona.
Hi, Mona.
Okay, so I'm the one who's asking about the country from Mongolia because I'm from Mongolia, and I'm just going into the knitwear now in here with the like manufacturers, and I see that like the problem you guys mentioned that because there is, I think it's the quality wise that it didn't have that much people from Europe or USA who checked the quality check before. So like whenever it comes to the quality check, they're sort of like humble over that, and also the person who connects the like factory with the like brands. So like I think we're quite new to this industry of like manufacturing country because most of the manufacturers trying to make their own brand and then trying to hit the world market themselves. But I see that that's very slow, and then now they're interested. Oh, maybe we could be the manufacturing country ourselves. So like I see that there's an opportunity there. Like also Mongolia is like coming as a new like manufacturing country for the brands, international brands. And I'm also seeing like a yak recently coming in the market in Mongolia a lot, like a yak there.
Mm-hmm.
And do you guys have like any experience of yak? Because the price point is very like the quality wise it can't get the same as Kashmir, but the price point is very like good, and it's like also very like reasonable with the quality of its stuff. So if you guys have any like experience with yak, like I want to also hear.
So I want to restate your question just to make sure we've got it. You want to know if they have any experience with yak and the quality and cost. Yeah. Okay. Anybody?
Yeah,
I've worked quite a bit with yak. It's a beautiful fiber. I would classify it as a luxury fiber. So similar to cashmere, it's a higher price point item. It's a protein fiber, and it's a lovely product. There's nothing inherently like negative about it. I would say that it's very warm and it's very expensive.
Do you think that there's like a reason why it's not a more commonly used fiber besides
here in the U.S., like in particular? I can speak only really about my experience in the U.S. market is warm sweaters here can actually be.
Oh,
so
is it just me or is she breaking up?
Yeah.
Breaking up.
I will try to talk slow.
Yeah, it's when you get excited and passionate.
Warm wool, itchy fibers tend to not be super popular in the U.S. market. But that doesn't. You don't have to appeal to a broad audience with a luxury item, right? You just have to find the right one. Camel here is a very popular fiber with a small segment of the luxury market, particularly in menswear, where all of those warmth and price, those are all positives.
Alrighty. Do we have any other questions? Oh, Davina?
Hey, hi guys. By the way, really lovely chat and a lot of insider things that you get only from people who've been doing this for a while. So thank you for your time. My question is kind of, so I'm an educator. I work in fashion education, and my question for you was based on your own personal experiences and based on young professionals you interact with. What do you think schools teaching fashion design, so not a specific course for knitwear design, but schools teaching fashion design to students, how can they better their education to help students understand, like help aspiring fashion designers better understand this entire marvelous world of knitwear design that exists and help them better prepare for that kind of a career if they so choose?
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful question. That's great. Wow. I wasn't ready to really take on this question. So really, I like it. I need to mull it over. But I think from my experience, and I've been out of school for more than probably 12 years, so I didn't learn a lot of the technicalities of what it's like to work. I had to learn that at work, and I remember my first job. Someone had to sit down with me and teach me how to do a tech pack, and I think like I kind of have a concept of how it was like there was a class that taught me PLM, which is not even like, yeah, it's one system, but that not every company uses that. So just how to make a detailed tech pack, how to communicate with the manufacturers. And I think fashion school does a really good job in training people in like the how to make a garment. And most of us are not doing that on a daily basis. I think it's really important to know how to make a garment so you can talk to people about how to make it and you know the technicality, and but you're actually not being taught how to communicate that in a jobs in a work setting. And how to make connections. I mean, having my own business, I've had to change my mind about how to build relationships. And when I was in school, I really didn't know how to do that, and that took me many years to, and that it probably comes very natural to more people that are more extroverted. But I have this example of when I was in school, people come in as lecturers. I think that needs to be more of a thing, because I think the teachers and the professors are very good at teaching, but like you need to bring more of the people that are working and the industry being a lot more involved in the curriculum. Not necessarily, they don't have to work in the school. It's more like we need to have a lot more people talking about what the industry is really like, how to work, how to network, how to build these relationships. I remember one scenario where maybe two scenarios where someone from the industry came to my classroom, and she kind of picked a project that was her favorite project, and she ended up picking mine, which is really amazing. But you know what I did? As soon as we finished, I ran out of that classroom. I didn't ask for her number. I didn't ask for her email. I don't know now her name. I don't know where she works. And I would love to know her now. 15 years later, I'm like, where are you? Like, how can I have a mentor in the industry where I feel like I wasn't really taught how to do that? And that should be building partnerships, networking, and presenting yourself in front of your industry. I think is a really valuable skill, a soft skill.
Wonderful
Okay.
answer.
Yeah. And I would say, which isn't very popular with fashion schools, but have a few knitting machines so you can see what's going on. And because I used to work in a university, and that bit is expensive and takes up space, and management doesn't like that. I've been around that roundabout.
All right,
Thank you,
Amanda or Cristina, do you have any last thoughts on this question?
I agree with both Mari and Kate. Yeah. Great answers.
Thank you, guys. That was beautiful.
All right, we are now almost 20 minutes over. Thank you guys so much for spending time with us today. Thank you to the panelists for all your extensive knowledge and for being willing to be here and share that with everyone. And I will be following up with information about next month's Lunch and Learn. So if you guys are interested, really exciting things happening there. So keep an eye out for that email. Thank you so much
for having us.
Thanks, Courtney.
Such